very long, very long. And I've always had the highest admiration for him. And with that being said, Leon has accepted to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Apuni Oko Hawaii Pa'aina. So let me now introduce to you Leon Siu.
Let's get on the other flight.
Yes.
Aloha. Aloha ia mai o kou, ai maluhia ho'i e ke akua, e kou ka kou mākua, ai e ka haku, a me ka uhene, uhane he molele. Aloha. My pleasure to be here today, and mahalo, mahialani, and Aupuni o ko Hawaii Pai'aina for inviting me to be here for this Day of Unity. And this is something that has been heavy on all of our hearts, and we're all headed in the right direction, which I believe is to unify the movement into a nation, to be a viable, presentable, and active nation. So a lot of the stuff that's been going on here today, well, what Mahilani talked about, because I just came during her part, has to do with identifying ourselves. And this is the key to where we're going as a nation and how we put our nation back together again and how we present ourselves. Because the weapon that has been used for many, many years was to actually nullify and make the kingdom of Hawaii invisible, to make our people invisible, to make our cause invisible, to make our nation invisible. And it was a very successful campaign on behalf of the United States to create this cloak of invisibility ever since the takeover and the non-annexation in 1898 and territory in the year 1900, and statehood, of course, after that. The whole effort of the U.S. has been to annihilate and to extinguish the Hawaiian Kingdom. The great thing is that they weren't able to succeed. And as of about 40 years ago, a movement started, first with Kaho'olawe and several other land disputes and things like that. As that movement started, and as we became more self-aware about our identity, culturally, through our language, through our music, through our dance, and these types of things, we began to self-realize who we are. And as people started to study our situation, Kawai Puna Prejin and George Helm, and many of the others who were leaders at the very early part of this, although we didn't have the understanding completely or even near what we know now, there was still the sense of this invisibility that had been used against us to make us disappear as a nation. So our chore over the last 40 years has been to reawaken the nation, to become, again, self-realized, to identify ourselves, to recognize one another, and to recognize who we really are. And this is very important, not only to us, but it's an important step for the entire world. It's an important step for the Pacific area and for the entire world. So for the last 15 years, I've been representing the Hawaiian Kingdom as the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Now some people say, well, who appointed you to do this and who appointed you to do that and things like that. That part is not really relevant. I have been appointed by several different governments to represent the interests of the Hawaiian Kingdom in places like the United Nations and other international forums. But the thing is, when you go to someplace like the United Nations and you go talk to, for instance, the Palestinians or others that are struggling for independence, the West Papuans and people like that, nobody's really interested in which particular faction or organization within that nation sent you. All they're interested in knowing is that what is your cause? And why do you think there needs to be a recognition or an acknowledgement of who you are? Now, for the Hawaiian Kingdom, as Mahealani was explaining earlier, and we've known over the years, there's no problem illustrating the fact that the Hawaiian Kingdom was and acted and performed as and lived its life as a sovereign nation. The only pilikia comes after 1893, when the U.S. tries to bury it. But as I said earlier, they were not successful in making us entirely disappear. And in the last 20, 30 years, we've actually been more successful in coming alive again and presenting ourselves. The work that I've been doing at the United Nations is in a lot of different committees and a lot of different meetings of the United Nations conferences and things like that, that discuss all kinds of different topics. They'll discuss demilitarization, they'll discuss nuclear proliferation, they'll discuss climate change, environmental issues, human rights issues, discrimination, all these types of things. The amazing thing is that we can talk, we can speak as a nation to every one of those issues and have our voice be known. So I do attend lots and lots of different meetings at the UN, and every time I go there, I am able to speak to the situation in Hawaii. For instance, Mauna Kea, as an example of the desecration, willful desecration of a sacred site. And this comes under human rights violations. So I can speak to that and we can gain some traction in that. The most important thing is that the people in these different organisms like the UN hear our story from many different angles and from many different levels. So I've been working primarily in the area of human rights and in the area of diplomacy and presenting our nation as a sovereign, independent nation in continuity. That is, we never disappeared, we're still here, and what we're doing now is we are becoming more and more visible to the international community. So the more I attend these meetings, the more I speak, and others like myself, also, the more we do that, the more these nations become aware of us. Now, I should say that over the years, many of these nations, and particularly the nations that continue to have a treaty relationship with the Hawaiian Kingdom from the 19th century, many of these nations are very much aware of what happened, not only because of my efforts, but because of the efforts of those who went before me. Like I said, Kauai Puna Prejin, Bumpy was there for a number of years, Poka Lainui, Mililani Trask. So many of our people have been there to give this message, and it's now, this message is now taking root. And I'm really pleased to announce that we are getting very close to a major breakthrough. In fact, we did have a breakthrough. Yes, thank you. Yeah. And I'll explain a little bit what that breakthrough entails. But we had a breakthrough just this past May, which was a significant enough of a breakthrough to change the level of the discussion at the UN from that of a domestic issue within the United States to that of an issue of international relations between the still existent Hawaiian Kingdom and the United States. So in other words, we've broken through that barrier that the US has placed around us, trying to keep us enclosed and contained within the definition of a nation within a nation, or within the definition of an Indian tribe within the United States, or an indigenous people within the United States. So we've broken through that barrier back in May, and it was a significant breakthrough. However, it was not the type of breakthrough that we would expect. That is, no one came out and exclaimed or proclaimed that the Hawaiian Kingdom is a sovereign, independent nation. It wasn't that way. What it was, what somebody said, shouldn't we be discussing this on the level of international law? And that was really the basis of what was said. But by saying that, it actually elevated us out of the trap of the domestic realm of the United States. And so we were working on that now. Now, what happens in the United Nations and places like these intergovernmental organizations, what happens in those places is that everybody who goes there, every representative who's there, every diplomat, every clerk or staff member of the different embassies and missions that go to the United Nations, they're instructed and they're hired by their own governments. They're instructed to be sure to look out for the best interest of our country. So if you come from Malawi or from South Africa or from Argentina and places like that, Cuba, your instruction, your primary instruction as a diplomat is to look out for the best interests of your country. That is, you cannot make any decisions that, especially decisions that will harm your country. But they would like for you to make decisions or to contribute to the discussions in ways that will improve the stature of your country and improve relations with other countries. So this is a big thing in the United Nations. Everybody's trying to play safe, and not just because of self-interest, but because, well, it is because of self-interest, but it's a self-interest for their own country, to protect their own country. So they're very reticent to come out and say, we recognize the Hawaiian Kingdom as a sovereign nation because we have a treaty with the Hawaiian Kingdom. They won't say that, not yet. But they will say, shouldn't we look at this on the internet in light of international law, where any international law is violated by the United States? So that's the level we're at right now. We do know, however, that once we get to that level, that many of the nations have signaled that they are ready to engage on a more direct questioning of the United States and the situation of Hawaii. However, once they've signaled that, we are the ones that have to create the situation in which the question comes up on the international level. And what I'm saying is that we have to precipitate the discussion so that they can chime in. They will not go ahead and initiate the discussion for us. They won't confront the United States and say, you have to let go of Hawaii. But they will confront the United States if we say, United States, you have to let go and you have to depart from here. And we present it in a level that it becomes a heated discussion, enough of a heated discussion that other countries can then chime in, and that's where we'll get their help. What we need to do is to precipitate, and which is what we've been doing. We've actually been building up to it, and this very event is part of that as well. We have to be the ones to precipitate the movement toward our own freedom. So the freedom movement has to start from here. The rest of the world is waiting for us to make that first move. So the good thing is that we've been preparing all this time for that. And we're at the point now where we understand very clearly about our own situation, about our identity, and about what our options are. And as the United States begins to see that we are coming to that point of being able to exercise the option of restoring and reinstating our nation as a sovereign, independent nation, the United States is getting more and more desperate. And that's why we see this incredible push that they've been undertaking, the state of Hawaii and the United States, this incredible push to try to keep us subjugated under the United States. So beginning with the Akaka Bill, well, actually beginning with the formation of OHA, but then that was kind of, nobody really understood what was going on at the time. But when the Rice v. Cayetano case was ruled on in the year 2000, that said that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs cannot hold a race-based election or race-based positions in a state agency like the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. And that it would be contrary to the Constitution and laws of against discrimination, racial discrimination. And so that particular case was ruled by the U.S. Supreme Court to be unconstitutional. The elections of the OHA elections were unconstitutional unless they included everybody in the state of Hawaii. Now that's U.S. laws pertaining to a U.S. agency, the state of Hawaii, and our U.S. government, the state of Hawaii, as well as the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. So once that occurred, the state of Hawaii became very afraid that that things were going to change pretty drastically as we start pushing toward independence. And indeed, a few years earlier, there had been a Hawaiian election, and there was seated a convention that talked about what options the Hawaiian Kingdom or the Hawaii should have towards self-determination. And they came up with two options. One was full integration into the United States, and the other was complete independence. In the discussions, it started out with sort of like 50-50, but by the end of the convention, it came out more like 75% were for independence of the members of the convention. But then they decided that they would put both options in front of all the people to vote on as a matter of getting a clear indication about what the will of the people was. So they started to embark on the mission of educating everybody about these two options that they were going to present in this vote. Well, the state of Hawaii cut the funding at that point. They did not want this to proceed any farther because they could see that the option of independence was a growing and one that was becoming the majority opinion. So they cut the funding. This was in the year 2000. So that same year, the Akaka bill was introduced. And that Akaka bill was to set us back to say that the United States government would like to recognize or would create an entity of Native Hawaiians. And as Mahealani said earlier, Native Hawaiians, according to their definition, which is U.S. citizens Hawaiians. But they wanted to create, of course, this Native Hawaiian tribal situation, and that Congress had the power to do so. Only what happened was that their bill, in spite of the fact of it being rewritten a number of times and getting close to being passed, never passed. And Senator Akaka, who was the major force behind that bill, passed away in 2012. And so there went that particular option. So immediately the state regrouped and said, how about if we create the Hawaiian nation within state law and then present it to the United States Department of the Interior to accept as a native tribe, an American native tribe. And so that's how Kanai'oluwalu came about. So the list that was created for Kanai'oluwalu, the intention was to create this nation that would accomplish what the Akaka bill could not accomplish through Congress. Now they were going to do it through the Department of the Interior. So, and most of you are familiar with the whole story. When they ran up against this, the specter of Rice v. Cayetano, a race-based election, when they ran up against that, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs that was actually administering Kanai'oluwalu, well, Kanai'oluwalu was a separate commission, but the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is very much in deep with that and providing all of the funding, over $4 million for that. When the Office of Hawaiian Affairs realized that they were going to run into the problem of a race-based election being illegal in the United States, unconstitutional, then they struck on this plan to create Na'iopuni, which was to circumvent U.S. constitutional law by creating this sort of non-entity, or non-governing entity called Na'iopuni. In other words, it could become a private club or corporation or something that was going to choose its own membership and choose its own representatives. for this election. So that's how we're in the situation we are now. Of course, that is being heavily challenged again on the constitutionality, because it was all government funding, and now they're saying it's a private operation. So it's most likely that Na'iaupuni will not survive the legal challenges that will come up against it. But even if it does, a lot of people have said, we're going to get in there just as insurance and use that platform to talk about independence and try to push that mechanism toward independence. And this will again provide at least the discussion, but now on another level, on a very visible level, about independence. And so that's why a lot of our brothers and sisters in the movement have decided to run for this Na'iaupuni in order to get in there to sway the discussion again back toward independence. We don't know how that would work out, but again, it's a long shot on the part of the state of Hawaii and those that are pushing for Na'iaupuni. It's a very long shot that it will ever succeed. So, and I don't want to say it's a sure thing it won't succeed, but even if it does, as we claim and identify ourselves as Hawaiian nationals, or say Hawaiian subjects, as subjects of the Hawaiian Kingdom, it doesn't apply to us. It cannot apply to us. Just like all of the examples that Mahialani was talking about, how the laws of the state of Hawaii cannot supersede the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom here in the Hawaiian Kingdom. Therefore, no matter what the state of Hawaii passes, no matter what the United States passes as a form of governance, it doesn't include us and it doesn't apply to us, and we still have the superior position once we claim our own government. And I'm not saying we haven't, we have, it's there. But now we need to increase the number of people who understand and who will support the movement. A little while ago, I gave a talk over at St. Andrews, and I was describing, you know, in the old childhood nursery rhyme, they have that thing like, here's the church, here's the steeple, open the church, where are the people? And then you invert that, and you go, here's the church, here's the steeple, open the church, and there are the people. That's what the situation we're in right now. We've got the church, we've got the steeple, we need the people. Okay, and so there are a number of efforts going on to recruit and to not so much recruit, but to help people identify themselves as to whether or not they are the people, the nationals, the subjects of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And by doing so, we lend a tremendous amount of weight as to who we are. So even if Na'iaupuni or Kana'i'oluwalu claims to have 95,000 names, most of them which were stolen from other lists, if we show that we have at least a substantial, we don't even have to match that, but if we show that we have a substantial number of people here, the credibility, not the legality, but the credibility becomes even higher. So one other thing I wanted to kind of talk about, and come back to this point later, is the idea that every law, every international law, every state law, every US constitutional law, every Hawaiian Kingdom law is on our side. We win no matter which direction, which venue we want to argue with. Legally, from a legal standpoint, if the venue is honest and just, it will rule in our favor. The problem has been that the venues we've been in, the United States and state courts, is not honest and just. And they rule always in their favor because of self-interest. They want to preserve themselves and they want to preserve their control of the Hawaiian Islands. So, we have every legal argument on our side. And even on the international level, we have every legal argument on our side. But there are still, even the international courts will probably not rule in our favor because of this the power of the United States and the fear on their part that they may upset certain balances, delicate balances. If they anger or upset the United States, and certain balances could be thrown off. So they don't want to take up our case per se, as a case of legitimizing our claims. So we have a very tough way to go. So the best way to go is, again, for us to precipitate, for us to create a situation in which we ourselves are the freedom movement for Hawaii, not relying on the courts of the International Court of Justice or the U.S. Supreme Court or any other courts. And that is why we need to get active and to build our nation. Now, what does it mean to build our nation? It means that we start thinking of ourselves as living as free people within the Hawaiian Kingdom. Don't think of ourselves as occupied anymore. Think of ourselves as being free people in the United States. If we take that, in the Hawaiian Kingdom, if we take that position, then we start to convince ourselves of our identity and of our stance, where we stand. So it's a matter of, Christopher over here had on his bicycle there on the side. What does it say on the sign? Every day I ride in the Kingdom of Hawaii. Okay. Every day I awake in the Kingdom of Hawaii. Every day I take a breath and I breathe in the Kingdom of Hawaii. All my friends and relatives live in the Kingdom of Hawaii. No matter if they're U.S. citizens or what, they're living in the Hawaiian Kingdom. And we start thinking, we start looking around ourselves, all of this is the future capital of the Hawaiian Kingdom, this building. Nice building, isn't it? And if we just look all around us, we start thinking in terms of this is all the Hawaiian Kingdom. We stop thinking of ourselves as being oppressed minority within our own country. We start thinking this is all of our country and we're free. And we start envisioning that and we start acting like that. And if we do that, then it comes back. It becomes the factor that precipitates the question. And the question, of course, of the U.S. illegal occupation. So the more we think of ourselves, the more we will order our own lives and live our lives in such a way that it challenges the status quo, it challenges the United States occupation. One of the things we can do, for instance, is the word mainland was a word that was deliberately embedded into our vocabulary from 1959, because before that, Hawaiians used to call the United States the States. But in 1959, they went on a protracted and heavy campaign to say, don't call it the States, we're now the States. So through our own terminology, they use that to change our minds as to our status. So we were no longer Hawaiians and them the States, we were now the States. So my proposal is we dump the word mainland. We never refer to the United States or America or the continent as the mainland, because it's not the mainland. We are here. This is our mainland, these islands. So if we can do that, what we do is we subtly change a habit. And it's habits that keep us, and as Mahealani said, fears and habits that keep us entrapped into the system that we're in right now. If we break the habits, we begin to break the fears. We begin to break all of these attachments that we have to the United States, and we set ourselves free. And a free people will then do the right thing to organize and to lift up their own country. There are a lot of other things we can do, and one of the strongest words that we have in our society, in Hawaiian society, is Kuleana. See, Kuleana is really important because it refers to each person's responsibility, each person's calling. What did God call you to do? And that's your Kuleana. And the Kuleana of one person is just as noble and just as important and just as holy and sacred as another person's Kuleana. So the idea is if you're true to your Kuleana, you are also expressing your independence. And that independence, as many people start to do that, and when I talk about Kuleana, I'm talking about going back to planting lo'i, and to ku'ikalo, those types of things. But not only that, it's the people who are serving in the Department of whatever departments that are in the state, so highways departments and all that. If we accept our own Kuleana as to do the best possible job in that particular position, let's say land management and things like that. Once the Hawaiian Kingdom actually officially returns, then all of these people are already prepared and in place and ready to do the job to carry on the functions of government and the functions of our nation. So whether you're an educator, whether you're a ditch digger, whether you're a bus driver, whatever it is, you do your Kuleana, you do it the best you can, because it serves our nation in the long run. And it serves the whole purpose of why we are such a special nation. And that, of course, was a gift from our kupuna, from our forefathers, who said everybody is responsible for his own Kuleana. And they understood that by doing that, it all puzzles together into a whole picture. And so we don't have to get overwhelmed by the big picture. I mean, how do we get the United Nations to recognize us? That's too big a picture. All we do is we do what God called us each to do, and that's our Kuleana. Some people he's called to be activists. Some people he's called to be farmers. That's just as much of an action of restoration and an action of reactivating our nation as a person involved in the political area or in the legal area. Oh, and I wanted to say one more other thing about the legal area. I really want to thank those people who are pressing the legal issues in all of the different courts, because that is also keeping our nation or the awareness of our nation alive. Because the more we talk about Hawaiian Kingdom law and why the oppressors' laws don't apply to us, the more we talk about that, the more we free our own minds. But one of the things that's missing is that we do talk about Hawaiian Kingdom law. We talk about how the United States and the state courts are stacked against us. What we have to do is consciously resurrect and reinstitute the Hawaiian Kingdom courts, the Supreme Court of the Hawaiian Kingdom. Now, right here is a table full of documents in which the Hawaiian Kingdom has already run through or has already processed through the Hawaiian Kingdom courts. So what we need to do is to get our nation together to start relying on a Hawaiian Kingdom court that's going to interpret and read the Hawaiian Kingdom laws according to the laws that were passed during the Hawaiian Kingdom, particularly the session laws of 1892. So we have a lot of work to do, but it's not daunting. We are skilled enough, we are inspired enough as a people to go ahead and start to move our country forward, to precipitate, to identify ourselves, to pull together as a nation, to bury differences, not bury differences, but let them not divide us. Have our differences, but deal with them at the right time, not try to anticipate problems, but just simply start to move the nation forward. And as we move forward together, we'll find that many of the little pilikia that had divided us or had caused strains amongst us will disappear. As we work together, and so we'll all start to see, that was that person's Kuleana, that was not mine, that one is somebody else's Kuleana, mine is here, and it'll all work together. So I just want to encourage everybody, Now, going back to my recent experience, I just came back from the United Nations in New York last night. And like I said earlier, we are making tremendous progress. The progress is, again, at the level of now we are able to engage the United Nations on the level of us, the Hawaiian Kingdom, being under the subject of international law, not under domestic law. So that's a major breakthrough. So we started this past week, we were able to put into the hands of certain key elements within the United Nations petition, or not a petition, but a letter asking them to please reconsider our situation, or to consider our situation within this particular committee's purview. And so we've gotten a very, very positive initial response from them. We have several other petitions and requests in Geneva, at the United Nations in Geneva, different organisms there, and the Human Rights Council and several others. And so there we're getting also a positive indication that they are going to start to look at this. Now that the barrier of this division between domestic and international line has been crossed, they're going to start to look at this. Again, it's going to be a little slow in coming, but the interesting thing is that because of our history, because of our position, because the Hawaiian Kingdom is a nation in continuity, that is, it has never faded away. We don't have to go through all the steps of building a nation on the international level. So many other nations that are, say, emerging nations in the world go through years and years of structuring, deciding what they want, what kind of government they want, and things like that, having numerous referendums and numerous plebiscites and votes. Guam, for instance, is going through what is now a 50-year process of decolonization. And so is American Samoa. You never hear about it here, but actually they're going through a process of decolonization right now. They're in probably the last few years of making a decision as to which direction they want to go. So for us, if any one of the items that we have placed before these different committees at the United Nations, if any one of those gets the attention that it deserves, and it starts to, then the committees start to do their work on it, it actually spells the end of the United States shibai, of this whole story that they've concocted. Because the moment they start looking, for instance, at the 1959 plebiscite that was held here in Hawaii, the moment the United Nations looks at it and sees that the United States had lied to them about what actually happened here, then that will negate the United States report to the General Assembly. The General Assembly will say, we don't recognize the United States authority over the Hawaiian people because the Hawaiian people did not have a fair choice. And once that happens, if it happened back in 1960, for instance, almost nothing would have changed. But we know now that the Hawaiian Kingdom is still in continuity. And so if anything happens to shake the United States' claim over Hawaii, the Hawaiian Kingdom springs back into place. So that's how close we are. Now, whether or not we're going to actually get them to do this within the next year, it's possible, but we don't know. So we have to keep the pressure up. Meanwhile, we have to show the world that we mean business. We want our country back, and we're going to push forward with it. Mahalo.